Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your co-host, Big Wos, aka Wos and Nando, and I'm joined not only by my brother on the west side of Los Angeles, Nando Vila, but we got a very special guest in the building. He's a historian. He's a professor at UW up in Seattle. He is the host of the American Prestige podcast, which is personally one of my favorite podcasts. Danny Bessner, man. Oh, also, you write in the New Republic now, man. We're gonna get into that because it's getting real spicy. On the
Home of the bell
intellectual
curve. Home of the bell
home of the
curve.
bell curve.
Marty
Home of
Perret's
the,
in the bell curve. Well, thanks for having
Yeah.
me, Waz and Nando. Hello.
yes, we're
How's it
gonna
going?
get into the intellectual left and the cat fight that you find yourself in right now, Danny. But first, man, I think the biggest thing in the news right now, I think what people should be paying attention to is what's happened with Silicon Valley Bank, who went under this weekend. To give people just because I did a decent amount of reading to kind of figure out what happened. Um, these guys were having cash flow issues. The assets that they did hold, like money that they use from their depositors, which is the deal that you make with your bank when you deposit with them. We deposit with you, we charge you an interest rate, and you're supposed to try to make money for yourself with those deposits. And that's just sort of how the system goes. These guys, they did the classic, threw all of their eggs in one basket and got a bunch of these treasury bonds, right? Back when they were ultra cheap. And that's what all of their money was tied into. Only the Fed raised the interest rate, and these bonds that they bought at 1%, say, are now worth 3. So when they need to get rid of these bonds for cash, they have to sell them at a loss because everybody's like, why would I buy that with you at 1% when the Fed, the U.S. government, is now selling it at 3? And so Silicon Valley investors get a wind of this. There's a bank run. These motherfuckers go under. Joe Byron and Janet Yellen. Joe Brandon, excuse me, and Janet Yellen and that crew decide that they have to make all of the depositors whole. Shareholders took a bath, which I'm quite happy about. But, I just think a lot of people who aren't in tune with this world, right, just see this and it's just like, man, it takes 2 days to make this shit go poof, gone, nothing, no Congress involved, nothing. It's just 2 days of just like, we have to ensure the integrity of our banking system because
Well, yeah. Well,
there's no actual explanation. It's just we just have to.
It's breathtaking the speed at which one of these things collapses and just how fragile the whole thing is. Like it really is all just kind of held together by pins and needles and the like duct tape and whatever the expression is. But as soon as we talked about this a lot, was that as soon as they raised interest rates, all kinds of flimsy little stupid economies like the NFT shit or whatever, like just immediately evaporated. you know, and like this stupid bank that was only lending to Silicon Valley, like that's like the weirdest idea for any bank ever, is to just like lend to one industry, because like if anything wrong happens with that industry, then the bank fucking collapses.
So I think that's the most interesting. So there's a couple, I think there's 2 major stories. There's the House of Cards story, which you guys just talked about, but then there's a larger story of VC. And Silicon Valley Bank is actually really interesting because one of the premises of capitalism is that a free market will be able to more efficiently and successfully allocate capital than central planning, right? This was the big argument between the United States and Soviet Union. Free markets are better at that, right? So Silicon Valley Bank, which I believe was founded in the early 1980s, is founded at a moment when there's money gets cheaper because real wages decline in the late 1970s, and the way the United States still allows people to consume like the the pigs we are is by making credits cheap. So you have a rise of basically cheap money. So you have a bank that's specifically organized around venture capital. And the venture capital premise is that a bunch of entrepreneurs is going to be able to efficiently allocate that capital. But what I think is happening, and this is a big cultural change in our lifetimes, is that there's now the realization that Silicon Valley, as a significant, but in general, like its structural function, which is to innovate, like doesn't work, right? We got Uber, we got ride shares, we got, Blue Apron and stuff like that. But, welfare went down, everyone's depressed. We're all on antidepressants. So there's a disconnect between the promise of capitalism embodied in a VC and what we're actually seeing that the story allows you to really explore.
Well, the other thing is that it's just beyond the house of cards element. It's just how quickly the state can just mobilize to fix it. It's remarkable, like these deposits were insured up to $250,000, and that's like an age-old.
None of their depositors were had as little as $250,000 because you can't operate one of these startups at $250,000.
And that's a New Deal thing. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation or company is a New Deal thing.
It came out.
So it's been like that forever.
The crash of the Great Depression. It's like, we have to insure deposits to just make sure this system runs. Everybody has the main word you keep reading is trust. There's trust. There's faith in the system because this stuff is insured, even though. It's important to note, like, the vast majority of these deposits are way more than that, meaning they're uninsured. Okay. Yeah. The vast majority of the money in there was uninsured. And, again, if we're talking about the free market, the secret hand and all of that, like, if you're a depositor, there's supposed to be a two-way street, meaning I deposit this money. I get interest on it, but the reason why I'm able to earn interest on it is that there is a risk. That's the whole premise of it, right? Like, I'm taking a bet. This is what entrepreneurs always tell you. They're I'm such a genius because I took this risk. They love that fucking word.
And that they're brave and they're soldiers. Exactly. It's a whole culture of masculinity.
Exactly. And so when the Fed and Byron comes out, or Brandon, comes out and he's like, yo, we're gonna, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't have made these depositors whole. Like, one of my own friends, she works at a company, her entire payroll was in Silicon Valley Bank.
Right, exactly.
They might not have made payroll this Monday.
A lot of that. There would have been a lot of that because Silicon Valley for the last 12 years hasn't really made money. But I'm sure all the listeners the business model is you would become a natural monopoly and then you'd start making money. But it turns out you just don't make money even when that happens. So it's really all collapsing. So even if with this save, these people are still going to be laid off, it's just going to be in a more organized fashion. Like, a friend of mine works at Meta, and like they were basically told you're going to get laid off in the next 6 months.
Well, but the thing is, it's also like what they basically also just said is that, like, the FDIC insurance is limitless. Like, right?
Yes.
Like
it's a moral hazard thing. Yeah.
Major policy change. But Wos, did you see Giannis Antetokounmpo?
No, I did
you
not.
See what happened?
No, I didn't.
Giannis, the Greek freak. The New York Post reported that he has like over 50 bank accounts, all of them $250,000. Because he saw that the FDIC insures up to $250K.
Wow!
So he takes his salary and spreads it out over.
Wow!
Like,
that's good financial planning,
dude. He knows. He's been reading the laws. He understands the New Deal. He's from Greece. He knows that shit can go down any fucking second.
Yeah,
that is quite incredible to learn. But yeah, and of course, there's gonna be a bunch of like consequences from this. Just the idea that it now doesn't matter, right? But I don't think they can do this long term. But it presents a dilemma. It's like, okay, if the only money that's guaranteed is the shit in JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citi, then why the fuck would anybody deposit in these mom and pop quote unquote operations? But then these guys are going to say, oh, well, we don't want monopolies. So I'm just confused as to what these people are supposed to do.
Well, it should be, if the government is going to implicitly guarantee the deposits,
it should be nationalized. Yeah,
it should be nationalized. It should be run by the state. Like, it should just be a bank. Like the Federal Reserve should just offer bank accounts to regular citizens. If that's because then you're creating a situation where a bank can just do whatever the fuck it wants.
Right,
and it has no no cliff to fall off of, like, you know what I mean, if they do something wrong.
But,
So they can just do whatever the fuck they want, and the government will just bail them out every single time.
And but here, Nando, what's really interesting about that is that the Fed is also like completely undemocratic, right?
Totally.
So even if the government like took it over, you would basically have like a board of unelected technocrats deciding where to put the money. So I mean, the big thing, that the story of our lifetimes is really, we need to democratize a lot of this shit, which is just like totally out of the hands of any ordinary American, from foreign policy to economic policy. This is another data point in the fact that you need to democratize how basically the government, if they're defending everything, they're spending taxpayer money, even if they said that it's not going to be taxpayer, but it's ultimately all fucking taxpayer money,
well, that was the funniest, like, pedantic little point. Like, it's not a bailout because it's not. Well, where the fuck did the money come from?
Yeah, it's
Know,
ridiculous.
like,
it's so stupid. It's absurd. Yes, it's not.
Like, where the fuck did it come from?
It's not. It's not tax money, but it's money that they're obviously just making out of thin air. This, like, where is this money being created from if it's not taxes? Like, I don't understand that argument. And again, because I've been reading stuff from like normal economists, and then you read like the tech reporters, and it's just this idea of just one, like, pretty much everybody in Silicon Valley accepts that this is the beginning. I mean, the beginning is over.
Yeah,
like all that shit is done. There's no more part of tech that's gonna be some huge new innovation, moneymaker, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's maybe a little bit of hope in AI or even like virtual reality or whatever.
But that's getting rid of workers, right? The hope in AI is that they'll be able to get rid of workers and reduce labor costs. It's not creating value.
Because the internet has been conquered, you know?
Yeah,
the internet has been conquered by the 5 companies that we all know. You know what I mean?
Every industry has been conquered by the 5 companies we all know.
These VCs understand that, like, the stuff that you can actually get is so much smaller, so they have to behave way more cutthroat, right? This pie in the sky. Oh, this is a community, and the VCs.
They got rid of the ping pong tables.
The VCs understand they have to be nice to founders because, your reputation is everything, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, all of that shit is over. These guys are just behaving like every other financier in the world behaves. And the craziest part about this is that, like, led by Peter Thiel, it's like basically 20 guys. 20 dudes
who made a good bet in 1998. Like, that's what it is. Who made a good bet in 1998. It's wild.
No, but I'm talking about who took down this bank.
Took down the bank by, like, 20, in the group chat. It was like, group chat popping up. Like, they're sending like GIFs, and they're sending like a, picture of a hot chick, and then they're like, oh my God, you hear about SVB? It's like, yeah, shit. Where's Aaron Rodgers gonna go? Oh yeah, this SVB thing, it's kind of weird, huh? And then, like, wait, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. And then the bank collapses. Like, they just.
Insane.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I mean, it's a house of fucking cards, dude. Like, you blow on it and it flies away. It's like talking about like that there's no more hope in tech for profits. Like, if you think about a company like Apple, one of the largest, if it's not the largest company in the world by capitalization, it's one of the top 5 or something, whatever. They have something like $50 billion in cash on hand, just sitting there, that they're not investing in anything because there's nothing to invest in. There's nothing. They know that there's like nothing. Like, they just hold it, rather than investing it. They're holding it. They'd rather just collect the interest on it
in cash.
Yeah, and universities do that. That's companies. Like, it's a lot of companies that sort of thing could be made illegal. Congress could pass a law that you have to invest a certain amount of your profits. And I don't want to hear this bullshit that they could go offshore. We all know the American empire could make it so they don't. So that is definitely
2 seconds.
2 seconds. You don't. No, sorry.
Oh, you think the Cayman Islands are going to resist like American pressure to change their fucking laws?
Yeah.
Like, I saw Hillary Clinton personally intervene to like stop a wage increase in Haiti, and it was like, whoop, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it could totally be done like tomorrow. I mean, it's wild if you think the amount of capital that is literally hoarded. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's like way more than student debt, way more than all of this stuff that is like such a problem. It's disgusting.
Yeah,
it's a disgusting world.
again, and the reason why I think it's important we talk about it up here, is just because, like, just keep your eye on, just watch what they do and what they say, and when they act unilaterally. Like, you're not gonna like, you might hear a couple of Republicans break ranks, maybe a couple of Democrats might break ranks, but everybody is in lockstep on this. This is the kind of stuff that they all agree on.
Yeah, they're
right?
the two parties of capital, right?
That's it. That's it. My man Pascal Robert, he's like, yo, the fight between the Democrats and the Republicans is like, who gets to be the stewards, the middle management of capitalism. That's it. That's the fight. They don't give a fuck about this other shit. It's like, no. We want to be the supervisor. We want to be the floor manager of capitalism. That's it.
The funniest is the Republicans that are saying, like, Don Jr. and all these Republicans are saying that SVB collapsed because it was too woke. It's the best. Like, we live in the dumbest time ever. Like, we live in like the dumbest time ever.
Oh, so good.
Because these guys invested in the environment. It's like, bro, come on, bro.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's I encourage you guys to go read my man Ben Thompson. Go read whatever you can on this. It's important. It's fascinating. But I just really need to get into this fight. So I'm on my Instagram a couple of days ago, and I see DB on his story post like somebody just saying snarky shit like, "Oh, I'm being dissed," and I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy. Who's doing this or whatever?" I hit DB and I'm like, yo, who's doing this? He's like, bro, it's New York Mag, Jonathan Chait. I was like, wait, hold on, wait a second. Jonathan Chait, who's like, he's had these public intellectual battles with like numerous people. Most people remember the Ta-Nehisi Coates shit. Like, he's going back and forth with people all the time. So, like, I'm aware of the guy's work. If you don't know who Jonathan Chait is, he's basically your uber centrist lib, right? Like,
he's the guy who said Democrats should hope and push for a Trump victory in the Republican primary because he would be easier for Hillary to defeat.
He's got so many.
He's got some bangers, dude.
He's one of the best. He was
a classic New Republic guy,
back
in
under
the
Marty
glory days.
When New Republic was the in-flight magazine of Air Force One, the Stephen Glass days. He was there during the Stephen Glass days.
So I'm like, okay, Jonathan Chait is dissing my boy. I got to catch up on this. So I read Danny's thing, which I'm going to let him explain it, but I read Danny's piece in New Republic, which is excellent. You guys should all go out and read it. And then I read Jonathan Chait's thing, which essentially comes down to this guy was mean to centrists in his piece, and so therefore it's invalid. But Danny, can you get deeper into why you why you were interested in reviewing the book that you did in the New Republic, and just like what it's like to get, like, I don't know, like a fucking academic fight in public? That's crazy.
No, thanks. That's it. You described it pretty well. So just briefly, I'm sure everyone listening has heard the word fascist, and this is a common term in American political discourse. And for my PhD, I studied a lot of Nazi Germany, and in my studies, one of the major justifying reasons for what we would call centrist liberalism was centrists were saying that they were defending against communists on the left and fascists on the right. And so historically, centrist liberals have been like, you're a fascist, calling everything fascist as a way to justify a lot of what I would call their nefarious projects, the national security state, the de-democratization of American life that we were talking about. So for years, I've been saying, like, the term fascist, I think, it doesn't work politically because the people who use it for anti-left purposes, basically anti-progressive purposes. And then two, I also just don't think it works analytically. I think if you compare what's going on in 2023 United States, it doesn't really compare to Nazi Germany, which is what people think about when the word fascist is used, right? We have there's some resonances, like I would say ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, is genuinely like a Gestapo secret state police in Nazi
It's
Germany.
fascistic.
It's fascistic, right? That there's something real there, and like Trump just like lying about stuff. There's something fascistic there.
Like
But
if Kenya Burris made a show about ICE, it would be called fascist-ish.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That'd be a great like SNL parody.
Green light that.
Yeah.
But when you look at like what created Nazi Germany, you have a generation of people scarred by World War I, literally in the trenches or starving at the end of it. You have, I would say, a moment in political history where small bands of armed guys on the streets could actually have a political impact. I think if you look at January 6th, that didn't do anything, right? Back in the day, they might have seized the state.
Bro, they killed the archdude Ferdinand. Some dudes in a bar. It was just like, fuck you.
Right. You could do stuff like that. But so that's not possible today. And also a justifying logic for fascism was that there was a left to be against. And there just
that to me is the key. That to me is the key.
There is no left.
That fascism is like uncomfortable for capital. Like it's not like something they prefer to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It is uncomfortable.
It's not nice. They don't want to do that. They don't, you know, but they'll do it.
Fucked up, but they'll do it if the alternative is giving people shit.
Right.
It's like giving people stuff. It's like letting people have, you know, the profits from their work. We're not doing that.
And we're in no danger of that. So so analytically, it doesn't work. Well, and politically, I don't think it's particularly effective. That was basically the argument.
That was the argument. And then Chait comes in and he's basically like, oh, this guy's downplaying the Proud Boys. This guy is downplaying the far right and Stormfront and blah, blah, blah. And he's downplaying this. And really, he was just so mean to us liberal centrists.
That was basically it.
That was it. You were mean to centrists.
Yeah. It like I was saying, another person wrote like a takedown, but like I wish I had better adversaries. Enemies. Yeah, like this stuff is so easy, you know, like it's not even like that interesting. I'm not going to respond to either of them, but it is funny when you get like texts from people and you're like, yo, a New York magazine wrote an article against you. Like I think I mentioned like 17, 18 times by name in that piece. It's pretty cool. Like I like it. You know, it's kind of funny because it shows that when you get responses like that, it shows that like you got something true, because people could just ignore it otherwise. So it was pretty cool. I'm in favor of people writing articles against me. I like it.
you get off on it.
I thought what was really your most, like the shit that really set them off was that you mentioned that the Cold War has been over for 30 years. Liberals, they won, you know, they won. The liberals won, and not in the sense of Democrats and Republicans. Like people who don't really understand the concept or the idea of classical liberalism or whatever. We're not talking about Democrats, Republicans.
Guys, can I just very quickly? So if you think about in the 19th century, industrialization happened. In response to industrialization, there were various answers to how to deal with that. One of them was this thing called liberalism. Another one was communism. Another one was, I would argue, fascism. And so liberals emphasized freedom. The question is, what does that freedom mean? And there are different interpretations of that. But I would argue today that both the Democrats and Republicans are different sides of liberalism. Where Democrats emphasize freedom to do things, and Republicans emphasize freedom from things. That's not always true in every issue, but broadly speaking, that's what I meant by liberalism and what you were getting at.
Yeah, it's just the idea, like, yeah, you can have your guns, you can be gay, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just this idea that you need these personal, or some people would say civil liberties that both parties basically espouse, right? But you know, all that other shit, freedom in your job, no, you don't deserve democracy at work,
right? Because it all had to do with how to. It had to do with how do you deal with these massive profits brought along by capitalism. Every one of these ideologies thought capitalism was quote unquote necessary. The question is what you
even
do
communism.
With that. Communism said it was you needed. Basically, it said you needed capitalism to produce all this shit, and you need communism to control it. right? That's basically the argument of the basic argument of Marx. So these are all
and why many communists in Russia were not in favor of taking power, because they felt that Russia had not gone through capitalism yet.
Right. It was a peasant feudal society.
It was not ready for a socialist paradise, you know, as a result.
They hadn't produced enough of the goods that capitalism produces yet to sort of delegate this shit.
So this is the communist gambit, which I would say proved to be wrong, was that the working class would become conscious of itself as a working class
and just
across
do it.
Borders and take control of the system.
Just do it. Like everybody would see that this was. Everybody would see that this was obviously. Everybody would see that this was obviously a fucked up way to do things, and everybody the vast majority of working people would be like, "We can't take this shit," and they would unshackle themselves. But you know, the capitalists, it turns out, were a lot trickier and more clever.
Two things got in the way: nationalism and racism. Right? Like ultimately, those two things. Proved much more powerful. Yes, especially nationalism, especially in the European context. I think racism is really big in the American in the Western hemisphere, and of course, racism against Jews exists in Europe. But when we're talking about like the center of capitalism, it was the nationalism of World War I is really the thing that got in the way.
So that's a beautiful explanation. And so basically, what Danny is saying is that once the Soviet Union is gone and dead, there's no equal counterweight. Capitalism, liberalism, specifically, whether Democratic or Republican variety, or whatever the varieties are in Europe and other places, they've been left to their own devices for 30 years, and it's been a fucking failure. Like nobody.
How do you feel? Yeah, how do you all feel? Listen, good or shitty?
Nobody thinks the current state of affairs is awesome. And again, what Danny's point is, like, nobody's been stopping you from doing what you want. Like, this is your vision. This is like your vision has been carried out, and this has been the result. It's a fucking shit show. It's fucking awful all across the board. Like, you don't even need to be in America to see this. Go anywhere, and people will tell you, like, this shit ain't working the way we want it to, right? Which is, I don't even think can be argued at this point. I think that's the shit that's stuck in Chate's craw, is that you diss liberalism, bro. Don't ever diss the shield, bro.
And he identifies with it, right? He's like the embodiment of this ideology, and so
he loves
that's why
it.
He took it so personally, and that's why his attack on me was so personal. You know, it was wild. It was funny, but yeah, it and this is the problem, right? And to sort of lead to the big point, the big question I'm addressing in this other piece I've got coming on Fukuyama. The big question is, why hasn't liberalism's failure engendered an ideological attack? This is really interesting. You would think the obvious failures would have led to some sort of mega pushback. And I don't think either Trump or Bernie are the mega pushback that one would expect, which is like a totally different fundamental attack.
No, everyone is just going insane.
Yeah, that's what it is. Everyone's going crazy. Yeah.
Like, everyone's just going fucking crazy. No one has a coherent kind of critique of the system anymore. And the people just feel bad and feel wrong, and the response is to just literally go fucking insane. And I would argue it's because of essentially technological advances in mass media, and internet and social media, and all of that shit is just like it's not allowing people to engage with the world in a productive way. They're just like, I'm going fucking crazy.
It's cheap porn, cheap calories, and people feeling like engaging online
and
is politics, which is not. And pills, and everyone's on fucking sertraline, or you know, SSRIs or whatever. So I mean, it turns out that's a pretty effective combination to prevent revolution. Plus, the state is just way more powerful in 2023 than it was in 1923. Like that in 1923, you could take things over. You know, now
I don't see how you can take. How do you take over the drone program?
You can't. It's done. I mean, we lost. You need like climate change or a meteor.
Yeah, I've been doing a fucking podcast called Shoot the Messenger about a spyware called Pegasus, where they literally could just like go into your phone and see everything and turn it on your phone. And it's like, how are you supposed to compete with that?
Like the second you try to build some kind of
no, not just that, but just if you're trying to do something,
they just find you and kill you.
They just know you. They just know who you are. Like in 1959, a bunch of fucking bearded Cubans in the fucking mountains took down the fucking government.
Yeah,
80
people. It's wild. Yeah,
it's like not even 100 people were able to take down the whole fucking government. You know, that ain't happening no more
No,
anywhere.
it's not.
Wow, so
Like the
hopeful.
QAnon shaman could have taken down, could
Right.
have taken it down back in 19. If the QAnon shaman would have been in the hills of
If he
outside
was
Havana,
if he was in Santiago, he would
yeah,
have
yeah,
been
And
able
just
to
to get
get
on
Bautista out of there.
yeah.
exactly. And just one more final thing. I think with the fascism thing, people use it because they want to feel like politics is meaningful to them, that they are
Mhm.
fighting evil. Right. That's why they use it. It makes them feel, because the Nazis were
Well, that's why they
horrible.
keep calling January 6th an insurrection.
Right.
I'm like,
Exactly.
guys, come on,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Come on, y'all.
Yeah. It's
Insurrection?
right.
Yeah.
That's an insult to insurrection's past.
They exactly. These guys were taking. They literally had selfie sticks.
Right.
Like literally actual
Yeah.
selfie sticks is what they
The
brought
insurrection
with them to
will
this
be
insurrection.
selfied. Is the
Right.
yeah.
And they're not really afraid of it, and so there's a hollowness to it all.
No one really believes it.
No one really believes that. You read it, it's got no zhuzh, because they're not really afraid. They're mostly well-heeled upper bourgeois who are in no danger of anything, but they want to feel meaningful, and also they want to feel like they're in crisis, and so they pretend.
Is that what you think the Jonathan Chait types and this other fool who came at you? Is it like they want their right to feel like they're in grave danger? They want their right to feel like their grandparents or great grandparents fighting the Nazis.
That the stakes of his next
Germany?
column, he wants to feel like the stakes of his next column is literally keeping the hordes at bay.
Oh, the future of the democracy is at stake?
That if Jonathan Chait just doesn't have his take for the next issue of New York Mag perfectly articulated, that the fascist hordes will bring down the whole system. He needs to get up out of bed and fucking and get on the take machine.
People need meaning in life.
Meaning.
I mean, the way that this always arises to me is like all the bullshit left Twitch stuff where people just scream at each other in endless debates. It's just pure infotainment, but they want to feel like it's an existential discussion. Like, I'm a communist. What does it mean to be a communist without a communist party? Right? These are like basic questions that want nothing. It's identity. I'm a Yankees fan.
And that guy's a fucking Maoist pig. And it's like, what are you guys talking about?
There is no Marxist-Leninist party. So what are you talking about? It's like, I'm a Yankees fan.
What's so funny about that is about 2 hours before this call started, a book from Amazon came that I bought. I bought a Du Bois book.
Yeah.
And my girl was like, "What are you doing?" I'm just like, "Yo, I've really been in my Pan-African bag the last 3 weeks."
Then there's a new book called W.E.B. Du Bois International Thought, where it collects all of Du Bois on international relations and the color line. If you're reading Du Bois now, it's really good.
I will. I slept on Du Bois, to be honest.
Du Bois is the man.
I slept on him because that.
Is it Du Bois or Dubois?
It's Du Bois.
But it's Dubois.
No, it's technically, but he identified Du Bois because he said it was Du Bois.
He was a Yankee. He was a Yankee, but he's of Haitian descent. Like,
I mean, like,
his last name is French.
Yeah,
but he was a Yank, and so he went by Du Bois.
There's a letter where he spells it out: DEW space BOYS. Du Bois.
Yeah.
What Danny was talking about, like the party, and all that stuff, is like one of the things that was frustrating during the Bernie movement was like for any left to have any sort of power or any sort of real influence, like you need a certain degree of discipline. You know what I mean? And because the only thing you have is strength in numbers. You know what I mean? And so, like, if everyone is just trying to get their own little bullshit, as
their own brand,
their own brand, and maybe you are more correct or whatever. But like,
it
at a certain
matter.
point,
being right,
you got to subordinate. You got to subordinate your own bullshit,
which is impossible without institutions. With the left has no institutions, right? You're looking at the big problem of the left. There's no institutions really, either nationally or internationally.
Yeah.
That means you're not going to have discipline. That means you're not going to have coordination. And without discipline, coordination, you don't have strategy. So it's all random bullshit, and it winds up with people yelling at each other on Twitch.
Yeah. Shouts to my man, Dr. Ball, Jared Ball. We need a church. We need a fucking church, man.
Yeah,
we need a church, and we need it now. Cause there's no way. Like, the shit that happens on the internet with, cause like even some people like I'll see like black people on the left be like, oh, I don't fuck with Jacobin because they don't have a race first message. I'm like, bruh, like, who gives a shit for real? Like, if really your gripe is that like their coverage doesn't basically rub the asses of people who feel like they feel like they've been brought so low by the circumstances of their race and they don't concentrate on it in Jacobin. And I'm like, yo, bro, like, how can, like, if it's really about a left message, which is a collective message, how can that be your main gripe about people who otherwise have the exact same politics as you?
And this is
That's
why
crazy to me.
You see throughout American history in particular, it's different in Europe, but in American history in particular, the left is always fighting with each other because the left has never come close to power. And if you're never close to power, that has there's no disciplining effect.
And because Americans are naturally individualistic.
Yes, it's a right
from the start.
Yeah, I mean
from the beginning.
It's a right-wing country, quote unquote.
Is antithetical to a left. It just is,
Yeah, fundamentally. And the only reason America, to get back our mark, the only reason they were so individualistic, they held this fucking land. You know, what we're seeing now is that the land is gone. So people are trying to invest in fake land in the metaverse. That's what they're trying to create. And Elon Musk is trying to go to fucking Mars. Right. So like this is like it's a crisis of capitalism. But the problem is there's nothing coming. I think so. The Marxist position is that capitalism would be transcended. Right. But we're just having crisis after crisis after crisis without transcendent because the working class didn't become conscious in and of itself. So that's another reason why we all feel crazy.
Yeah. Like the and it's just like, this is not just like a Marxist position, but it's just like a kind of economics 101 position, is that the rate of profit over time goes down.
It
right?
has to. It has to.
It has to, because like if some company starts making a lot of profit on something,
no, eventually, hold on. What are you guys talking about? Our entire system is predicated on the idea that your next quarter has to be more profitable than the one
your
before it.
Individual company's quarter has to be. But the thing, what that does in the aggregate is that as soon as one company makes $10 in profit and there's another company which is not making as much profit, they're like, well, what are they doing to do all that profit? So we're going to do the same thing. And so then once they do that, the prices go down, you know, the profit goes down. Like competition naturally tends towards zero in a sector, right? Profit from a profitability standpoint. And eventually that happens across all of the sectors. And like when that's happened in the past, usually there's been just like a fucking giant war or some giant crisis to kind of just wipe the slate clean and start all over again. You know, and the question is now is like, what is that massive crisis going to do? Or is the system nimble enough now to just kind of paper over it, you know, like,
it did was it created cheap money. That's how the system, when basically profits stopped being profitable in the late 70s as a whole economy thing, they created credit and cheap money. But what the SVB thing is showing is that is coming to a halt. Right, to bring it back down.
Well, as soon as they raised interest rates for the first time in forever, right? You know,
exactly.
Like
these fools thought the interest rate would be at zero forever.
Yeah.
How could you think that? And these are the masters of the universe, guys, the smartest money people ever, allegedly.
Well, what's weird is that the Fed would do it. I was always kind of puzzled why the Fed's doing it, because it seems like a self-inflicted wound. Like, why don't they just keep it going? Like, keep it pushing, as you say. You know, like, why would they cause all these all this kind of like hoopla and chaos? And
I honestly think there's no other explanation. They like that them checks and COVID like flipping things on its head, as far as like they're like, yo, this is like a worker's paradise right now as far as your options and how bad these companies need you. That's the only explanation I see.
Disciplining labor. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that.
Like, that's it.
If you looked at what they talked about at Davos, everyone was obsessed with quiet quitting. So I really think it's wild. This was like the number one topic at Davos. So I think Woz is 100% right. I think they're trying to discipline labor. But the problem is,
only thing that makes sense. It's like when they talk about these alarm bells that they're like, I can't see, what are the alarm bells for? When they talk about this crisis of inflation and blah blah blah, I'm like, all right. But people seem to be getting through it just fine. Like, nobody's starving because of it. Nobody's whatever. All it means is that the people at the top, if this stuff costs more, need to come out of their pockets.
And that's
What's
not going to
so bad
happen.
about that?
Right. That's why they're going to fire
That's the
40 million
crisis.
people in Silicon Valley, right? The tech is going to shrink as a sector, both in terms of absolute people employed and percentage of the economy, I think. I think this is the end of the 15-year tech boom that was basically our entire adult lives, all three of us. It'll be an interesting thing.
What about all the people who learned how to code? What are they going to do?
Exactly, right? Exactly.
I think everyone should learn how to write screenplays. You know?
AI is going to replace both of those jobs. So the bad advice on both ends. First drafts are going to be AI now.
Lord have mercy. Well, Danny, I'm glad you survived the rock fight on the intellectual left. These centrists can't keep you down. Thank you for coming on. Please plug your stuff for people to check it out, man.
Yeah, just check out American Prestige, the podcast, if you like what I have to say.
My man, we will see you guys next week. Make sure you guys subscribe to patreon.com/countthedings. Please, if you can, support the GoFundMe for Jade Hoy and his family. We're about damn near 80% the way there. I'm telling you, this stuff is really impacting his family. That's super grateful for all the stuff that we've gotten so far. But if you can, please support that. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.